Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing about the topic Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Moving on to the introduction, conservation of living natural resources like plants, animals and microorganisms and the non-living elements of the environment on which they depend is crucial for development. Today the conservation of wild living resources is on the agenda of governments. A report from the Worldwide Fund has found that 52% of the world's animals have vanished in 40 years. India has an immense variety of natural resources. It has rich animal and plant heritage. However, the need of the hour is to protect the natural flora and fauna. The extinction of wildlife will ultimately lead to the extinction of the human race itself. Over the last few decades, there has been rapid decline in India's wild animals and birds, which is a cause of grave concern. Some birds and animals have already become extinct, and in order to conserve wildlife and maintain them, it's very essential to provide an appropriate environment and support system. The Indian law on wildlife, the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, was passed on the request from the states. The Act makes it possible to constitute a wildlife board with powers of regulation in every state or union territory. For the purpose of protecting, propagation, or developing wildlife and its environment, the power is conferred on the state governments and central governments to proclaim wildlife sanctuaries and national parks. Before we move into the topic, it's very essential for us to know a few definitions because without the knowledge as to what it means, we really can't understand the sections which we will be coming across in the next few slides. So the first one is wild animal. Wild animal means any animal found wild in nature and includes any animal specified in Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 wherever found. And the next definition is animal article, which means an article made from any captive animal or wild animal other than vermin and includes an article or object in which the whole or any part of such animal has been used, and ivory imported into India and an article made therefrom. So in this definition, you may be wondering what's a vermin. So that will be our next definition. That is, vermin means any wild animal specified in Schedule 5, like it could be crow, fruit bats, mice, and rats. So these animals do not fall under the list of wildlife or wild animals. Trophy. Next definition is trophy. Trophy means the whole or any part of captive animal or wild animal other than vermin which has been kept or preserved by any means, whether artificial or natural, and it also includes rugs, skins, and specimens of such animals mounted in whole or any part through a process of taxidermy. Taxidermy is nothing but where an animal is killed and the stuffing is made into it. Such kind of an article is called as such kind of a process is called as taxidermy. And the next is antler horn, rhinoceros horn, hair, feather, nail, tooth, musk, eggs, and nests. And next is all these are termed to be as trophies. And the next is hunting. With its grammatical variations and cognate expressions, it includes capturing, killing, poisoning, snaring, and trapping of any wild animal, and every attempt to do so is hunting. And driving any wild animal for any of the purposes specified in subclause A, and injuring or destroying or taking any part of the body of any such animal, or in the cases of wild birds or reptiles, damaging the eggs of such birds or reptiles, or disturbing the eggs or nests of such birds or reptiles is also termed to be as hunting. And the next definition is uncured trophies. Uncured trophy means the whole or any part of any captive animal or wild animal other than vermin, which has not undergone a process of taxidermy and includes a freshly killed wild animal, ambergris, musk, and other animal products. And now we will be discussing about the authorities constituted under the Act. The central government may, for the purpose of the Act, it can appoint a Director of Wildlife Preservation, Assistant Director of Wildlife Preservation, and such other officers and employees as may be necessary. And the state government, for the purpose, it may appoint a chief wildlife warden, one honorary wildlife warden in each district, and such other officers and employees as may be necessary. And next is the state government or the administrator of the union territory. It can constitute a wildlife advisory board, and it shall consist of the following members: the minister in charge of forests in the state or union territory. If there is no such minister, then the chief secretary. They shall be considered to be the chairman. And two members of the state legislature or the legislature of the union territory, secretary of the state government or the government of the union territory in charge of forests, the forest officer in charge of the state forest department, an officer to be nominated by the director of wildlife preservation, chief wildlife warden, officers of the state government not exceeding 5, and such other persons not exceeding 10 who in the opinion of the state government are interested in the protection of wildlife, including the representatives of tribals not exceeding 3. So all these are the members in the Wildlife Advisory Board. Next is duties of Wildlife Advisory Board. What are the duties of this Wildlife Advisory Board? The Wildlife Advisory Board is constituted mainly to advise the state government. So what kind of advice can this board give? It can give advices in relation to the selection of areas to be declared as sanctuaries, national parks and closed areas and the administration thereof, and in the formulation of the policy of protection and conservation of wildlife and specified plants, in any matter relating to the amendment of any schedule, in relation to the measure to be taken for harmonizing the needs of the tribals and other dwellers of the forest with the protection and conservation of wildlife, and in any other matter connected with the protection of wildlife which may be referred to it by the state government. And next is hunting of wild animals. Section 9 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, it prohibits hunting of any wild animal specified in schedules 1, 2, 3 and 4. And any person who hunts any wild animal shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years, or with fine which may extend to 25,000 rupees, or with both. And if any person commits the offence in a sanctuary or a national park with respect to an animal which is specified in Schedule 1, he shall be punishable with imprisonment which shall not be less than 1 year, but may extend to 6 years, and also with fine which shall not be less than rupees 5,000. However, the chief wildlife warden may permit hunting of wild animals in certain cases, like if he is satisfied that if any wild animal specified in Schedule 1 has become dangerous to human life, or is so disabled or deceased as to be beyond recovery, or if he is satisfied that any wild animal specified in Schedule 2, 3 or 4 has become dangerous to human life or to property, or so disabled or deceased as to be beyond recovery, and if the killing or wounding of any wild animal is done in good faith and in defense of oneself or of any other person, and for the purpose of education, scientific research, scientific management, collection of specimens, derivations, collection or preparation of snake venom for the manufacture of life-saving drugs. And next we will know as to what these sanctuaries are. A state government may, by notification, declare its intention to constitute any area other than an area comprised within any reserve forest or the territorial waters as sanctuary if it considers that such area is of adequate ecological, faunal, floral, geomorphological, natural or zoological significance for the purpose of protecting, propagating or developing wildlife or its environment. When a notification has been issued under Section 18 of the Wildlife Protection Act, the collector shall inquire into and determine the existence, nature, and the extent of the rights of any person in or over the land comprised within the limits of the sanctuary. And Section 27 of the Wildlife Protection Act prescribes restriction on entry in sanctuary, and Section 27 permits the entry of the following persons in the sanctuary. So when we are talking about restrictions about Section 27, it restricts entry into sanctuaries, but at the same time it says that a few people are permitted to enter the sanctuary. Who are those who have permission to enter into a sanctuary? That is a public servant on duty, or a person who has been permitted by the chief wildlife warden or the authorized officer to reside within the limits of the sanctuary, a person who has right over removable property within the limits of the sanctuary, a person passing through the sanctuary along a public highway, and the dependents of the persons who have been referred above. And next is every person residing in the sanctuary shall be bound to prevent the commission of any offence under the Wildlife Protection Act in the sanctuary, to help in discovering and arresting the offender, to report the death of any wild animal and to safeguard its remains until the chief wildlife warden or authorized officer takes charge thereof, to extinguish any fire in such sanctuary and to prevent the fire from spreading, to assist any forest officer, chief wildlife warden or police officer for preventing the commission of any offence against the Wildlife Protection Act or in the investigation of any such offence. These are supposed to be the duties of a person who is residing in the sanctuary. And next is National Park. The state government, for the purpose of protecting, propagating, or developing wildlife, may by a notification declare that an area, by reason of its ecological, faunal, floral, geomorphological, or zoological association or importance, needed to be constituted as a national park. So once a national park is declared, no alterations of the boundary shall be made, except on the resolution passed by the legislature of the state. So the following activities are prohibited in a national park, that is, destroying, exploiting, or removing any wildlife, destroying, damaging the habitat of any wild animal, deprive any wild animal of its habitat, grazing of any livestock. Closed areas. The state government may by notification declare any area as closed area for hunting, and no hunting of any wild animal shall be permitted in a closed area. And next is Central Zoo Authority. The central government shall constitute the Central Zoo Authority, and it shall consist of chairperson, such number of members not exceeding 10, and member secretary. Now, what is the function of the Central Zoo Authority? Specifying the minimum standards of housing, upkeep, and veterinary care of the animals kept in a zoo. Evaluate and assess the functioning of zoos with respect to the standards or the norms as may be prescribed. Recognize or de-recognize zoos. Identify endangered species of wild animals for the purpose of captive breeding and assigning responsibility in this regard to a zoo. Coordinate the acquisition, exchange, and loaning of animals for breeding purpose. Ensure maintenance of study books for endangered species of wild animals bred in captivity. Identify priorities and themes with regard to display of captive animals in a zoo. Coordinate training of zoo personnel in India and outside India. Coordinate research in captive breeding and educational programs for the purpose of zoos. Provide technical and other assistance to zoos for their proper management and development on scientific lines. Perform such other functions as may be necessary to carry out the purposes of this Act with regard to zoos. And Section 39 of Wildlife Protection Act declares that every wild animal other than vermin, which is hunted or kept or bred in captivity or found dead or killed by mistake, shall be the property of the state government. And if any of the above mentioned activities is found in a sanctuary or a national park declared by the central government, then it shall be the property of the central government. And any person who obtains by any means the possession of government property shall, within 48 hours from obtaining such possession, make a report to the nearest police station. And Section 44 of the Wildlife Protection Act prohibits dealing in trophy or animal article without license. Next is cognizance of offence. No court shall take cognizance of any offence against the Wildlife Protection Act except on a complaint made by the director of wildlife preservation or any other officer authorized in this behalf by the central government, or the chief wildlife warden or any other officer authorized by the state government, or any person who has given notice of not less than 60 days in the manner prescribed of the alleged offence and of his intention to make a complaint to the central government or the state government or the officer authorized as aforesaid. Next is prevention and detection of offences. Section 50 of the Wildlife Protection Act confers power of entry, search, arrest, and detention on the director or any other officer authorized by him, or the chief wildlife warden or officer authorized by him, or any police officer not below the rank of sub-inspector. And officer not below the rank of assistant director or wildlife preservation or wildlife warden shall have the powers. What are the powers they have? To issue a search warrant, to enforce the attendance of witnesses, to compel the discovery and production of documents and material objects, and to receive and record evidence. Now we will move on to the reference cases which you can cite here in this topic. The first one is Chief Forest Conservator Wildlife versus Nizar Khan. Hunting of wild animals, what I have put within the brackets is that this particular case can be referred to that particular subtopic. So this case can be referred to the subtopic hunting of wild animals. So in this case, Chief Forest Conservator Wildlife versus Nizar Khan. In this case, what has happened was this is a writ petition and the respondent was dealing with birds which is specified in Schedule 4, and he was also granted license, and he had applied for renewal which was refused. And later on, when the court looked into the case and it found that capturing of animals itself was not permitted under the Wildlife Protection Act, and therefore the license which was given to that person was cancelled, and it was this capturing of birds by this respondent was stopped, and it had refused the renewal of the license. And the next one is Tarun Bharat Sangh Alwar versus Union of India. This is famously known as the Sariska case. And this here the question was whether the mining lease in the notified area was illegal. And this area, as we know, the Sariska area, it is a tiger reserve, and mining lease was contrary to law. And therefore, the granting of license which was given to this particular company was prohibited. And the next case is Came Chinnappa versus Union of India. And this is a case which can be related to the subtopic National Park. And here it was relating to the renewal of license granted to Kudremukha Iron Ore Company Limited. And here also the license was not renewed and it was cancelled. It was court prohibited from renewing the license which was given to the company. Next is All India Mobile Zoo Owners and Animal Welfare Association versus Union of India. In this, the petitioners prayed the court to issue a writ of mandamus directing the wildlife warden for compensation of rupees 15 to 20 lakhs in the event of closure of the zoo. And here the petitioner was not entitled for compensation as they were holding the animals without the permission of the authorities. And next is Pyarelal versus State. And here the appellant was found possessing trophies of Chinkara skin, and hence he was punished for the offense. And next is Motilal versus Central Bureau of Investigation and others. And here the question was whether the CBI was authorized to investigate an offense which is punishable under the Wildlife Protection Act. So the court held that there was no substance in the contention which was raised by the counsel for the appellant, that Section 50 of the Wildlife Protection Act is a complete code and therefore CBI would have no jurisdiction to investigate the offences under the said act. So with this, we end the topic of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Thank you.